Hey, I'm Owen.
And I'm Kendall.
And we're at Huddersfield Scale Model Show 2018.
Let's go take a look around.
During our day at this small but fantastic model show, we met up with some really great people who gave us some very helpful tips. Andy from Scale Scotland teaches us about how he scratch-built his incredible M50 SP gun.
Duncan from South Lake Sci-Fi and Fantasy Model Club gives us tips on building and painting awesome Gundam and other sci-fi models.
Richard from Brampton Model Club describes how he painted his fantastic flanker fighter jet and fairy albacore.
Richard from the F1 and Motorsport Special Interest Group explains how he scratch-built his super Porsche 917.
And finally, Paul, who won Best in Show for his Syrian diorama, lets us into some secrets behind his award-winning piece.
Of course, these are just a few of the incredibly talented modelers who are at Huddersfield, and we'd like to congratulate everyone who's displaying their amazing work. The show consisted of one large hall with all the stands and traders, and another smaller hall with a competition area, which, by the way, anyone can enter models into.
We started the day exploring, taking in the atmosphere, which is how we met Andy, who was displaying his incredible scratch-built M50 SP gun. I asked him what materials he had used.
Tamiya running gear, through tracks, and the main gun was 3D printed. Everything else was done by eye from photos. So from scaling, perhaps if I knew one of the road wheels was 90 centimetres or whatever it was, I could scale from the photos up from there. I don't mind building a kit straight from the box, but that's where I get the satisfaction.
I asked him what his thoughts were on using 3D printing for scale models.
On some of the things I've had done or looked at, there's a lot of banding. So when I had that gun made, I asked my friend Clark to make it 5% bigger than it needed. So when I sanded it back, it was give or take the right sort of size.
What would you say the trick is to making models look quite realistic?
When I mix a colour for an Israeli tank, every time I mix a colour, it's different. And I'll have a grey, a sand yellow and a white, because the Israelis had this mixed paint. And so on the top, I'd have slightly lighter shades to the sides, to the bottom. And then, rather than dry brush, I'll actually go and pick out sort of nicer detail, bolts, edges, hinges, that sort of stuff in a lighter colour again. Once everything's done in a base coat, then you're into weathering. How I've found and what I've been told is layer, layer, layer. So if you do one little bit with pigment, let it sit, go back, add another layer. Don't try and do it all in one go. It doesn't work. Just think about where your tank served or where your aircraft flew and what it's going to be exposed to. And there's an old adage, less is more.
Some great advice there from Andy.
As we continued exploring, it was really nice to bump into some of you, have a chat, and see the work you had on display. As we continued to wander around, I spotted some Battlestar Galactica and Star Wars models, so we had to chat with Duncan about his extensive collection of sci-fi kits. How did you jump from being a fan of, say, these shows to making models?
I was always a sci-fi fan, even when I was at school. So it was only natural. Star Wars came out, obviously, and changed the world. So really that's where it all came from.
What's your favourite sci-fi model you've built of?
Oh, now you're asking. I do like my Eagle, in fairness, but only because you don't see them very often. Because one of the things that used to annoy us a lot, and one of the primary reasons we started the club, is you get a lot of people who buy kits, but you never ever see them built. So we always said, right, we'll build it. We'll make people go, wow, never see that. We'll build it.
Yeah. Are there any specific techniques that you think are slightly different when applied to Gundam?
I mean, from my point of view, no. I would have said they all follow the same sort of thing. It's just everybody has a different way of doing it. My simple view of this is you don't see the insides very much, so I don't care about the internal detail quite so much. The inside can be as rough and ready as you want, so long as the outside looks good.
Do you tend to build them and then paint them, or do you do them in sections, like build a bit, paint it, build a bit?
I build a bit and paint it.
Yeah.
But again, I try to make my sections as big as I can. I don't tend to paint on the sprue or anything like that. Everything comes off the sprues, usually ends up on the end of a rod with blue tack stuck on it, and I spray it. In my world, sci-fi world is very simple, so I use Halford's car spray a lot. I don't tend to use airbrushes or anything like that. It's not that I haven't got one, I do, but to be honest, I've hardly ever used it. Halford's car spray is brilliant. It goes on well, it's very forgiving when it's on. The only thing you can't really do with it is give it any wash, because the wash doesn't take.
Yeah.
But the rest of it, especially for gundams and stuff, it's brilliant because you can just spray it one colour, and anywhere where there's inlaid lines, you can just rough over it with paint and just wipe it off with your finger, and it just leaves the crisp lines. It's brilliant. And then you just weather it to your heart's content after that.
So there you go, there's some good tips from Duncan. I was trying to avoid spending too much money, but when I saw these framed images from original 1941 magazines, I really couldn't resist. I also picked up a retro Airfix Hurricane, which should be a nice challenge. In among a large collection of World War II aircraft was a very eye-catching flanker. I asked Richard to tell me a little bit about it.
It's a well-documented aircraft, lots of pictures on the internet, so I was fortunate I could actually make something that I thought was reasonably accurate. The camouflage scheme is actually masked and painted. I use Akan paints. They're quite a soft paint, and I found after putting the first colour on and then put the masks on, when I took the masks off, I took off half the paint.
Oh no.
So I found that what I had to do, having started again, was each colour of paint I then had to seal with a varnish.
So you clearly like World War II planes as well.
Yes.
Which one would be your favourite out of these?
The Albacore is a kit you don't tend to see built very often.
If you had one tip that you would give someone who was starting out in scale modelling, what would that be?
When you're starting out, build what you enjoy. The whole hobby is about enjoying it, so whatever you fancy building, go for it.
Mm-hmm. I couldn't agree more with Richard on that one. At the F1 and Motorsport Special Interest Group, I found Richard, who told me a bit about his crashed Porsche 917, which he had based on the Steve McQueen film Le Mans. I asked him how he built it.
I started with a donor of the car that was originally used and made a replica body shell and everything scratch built. The majority of the kit is made out of resin. I took a mould off a model. The body shell is made from fiberglass.
How long did that take you then, would you say?
Several months to make, putting it down, picking it up.
I asked him how he goes about making his own vac form parts.
The idea with the vac form is you make a former.
What do you mean by a former?
A former means a male mould, say a windscreen. You'd make the profile right, make it nice and smooth, and then I've got a little box that I use a vacuum cleaner and pull the material.
How do you go about getting that polished finish?
It's a very, very fine paper, and you start off rough and then work your way to a very fine, smooth paper, and then use car polish to polish things up.
If you had one tip for someone who is getting started in the hobby, what would that be?
Buy a good kit. Don't try and do everything we do straight away. Learn what you're doing, really. Learn your trade.
There you go, some good tips from Richard.
Unfortunately, by now we were running short on time, and we didn't get a chance to look around the whole competition area. But we did manage to catch Paul, who had just won Best in Show for his Syrian diorama. Owen asked him how he was feeling.
Fantastic. I've never put anything into a competition before, and I feel really chuffed, actually. I was quite surprised. And I didn't think it'd make it over here in one piece in the back of the car, so I'm even better now, sort of thing. It's actually won something. Yeah, really chuffed.
What inspired you to build it?
Well, basically the news, because obviously what I'm looking at the moment was the Syrian conflict and the various things that are happening over there. There's so much stuff on the actual news at the moment, and obviously through YouTube and things like that, to actually pick up the various machinery and weapons and things like that are being used over in Syria at the moment.
Is it actually based on a particular photo?
It's just basically made up. I'm an architect, so I usually have a tendency of building these things rather than making them look destroyed. Mm-hmm. So what I tried to do is, obviously with the scratch building, is actually make it look like it had been hit by various things as well.
So what kind of materials did you use to scratch build?
There's everything in there. There's resin, there's metal. The actual minaret is actually made out of clay. That was a mould from a lamp stand that was basically just then drilled into to make it look like it'd been smashed up. The actual top of the minaret is a Christmas decoration that's just been painted up and used that way. And it's just a case of looking at different materials that you can actually use to make them look a little bit more realistic.
Mm-hmm. There's quite a lot of different sort of techniques required because you've got figures in there, you've got vehicles in there, you've got buildings in there. How easy did you find sort of painting all these different types?
I hate painting figures. Absolutely hate painting figures, and it's one of those, if you want to do a diorama, you've got to do it. You've got to basically have a go at them. And again, it's reading books, seeing how other people do them. Obviously YouTube and the videos that are out there and the various really good Spanish and Italian modelers that are out there now that you can pick up off their stuff, exactly how they do them. I am not a very good figure painter, but you've got to add them to those sort of things. I much prefer to do the buildings and the actual vehicles.
If you had one tip for someone who is getting into the hobby, what would that be?
Try. Just have a go. Just have a go. I work with some juniors in respect of actually building models and things like that. Pick up an Airfix Spitfire or something like that and just have a crack at it.
I couldn't agree more.
Unfortunately, that was about all we had time for, but we both had a fantastic day. We managed to buy a few things and meet a lot of amazing modelers. I definitely recommend that you check out Huddersfield Model Show next year if you can.
We hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, consider supporting our channel on Patreon so we can keep making videos like this. Either way, thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you next time.